We're now in round 29, where again we start with a normal corner, single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 2 corner space. Our first stitch again is a puff stitch into this corner just below the first stitch. 3. That's our rooster Freddy that you hear in the background possibly. Again, I'm working in the outer loop of the puff stitch, and we're starting with 9 single crochet. It's a good protector for his little women, that rooster. Okay, a DC into that free front loop that may or may not be marked with a stitch marker, then a single crochet in the back loop only, and another DC in the same front loop. And we continue with 2 single crochet, and in the top of this 2 together stitch from the previous round, we're working a picot single crochet, another 2 single crochet, and then again we work in the free front loop that is between those 2 DCs. Actually, for this one I'm going to take the stitch marker out. For this one you can leave it in, or no, actually no, we take it out as well. One more round to go. So a DC, a single crochet in the back loop only, and then another DC. And we skip the stitches behind the DCs, and then we work 2 single crochet. Now I've got this, we had this treble here, and we'll work another treble around this one, the front post treble, and then skipping the stitch behind the front post treble, 3 single crochet. And now we're going to make the rosebud. There is a tutorial already for the rosebud, and I'm going to link to it in the description here. I'm just going to get a stitch marker ready. So I'm making the first stitch, and then I place a stitch marker in the 3rd loop of this first stitch here. Then I make another 2 single crochet into the same back loop. So I'm working single crochet in the back loop only. And then I grab the front loop, and then I'm turning my work just so that I can work easier. And I'm working 4 single crochet in the front loop only of the same stitch. So now I lost count. Oops, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, that's it. And keep on turning. So I'm now looking at the right side of my work again, and I'm going to close this rosebud with a slip stitch in this 3rd loop that is marked with a stitch marker. I'm keeping the stitch marker in so that I know in the next round where I'm going to work into. Another 3 single crochet, and then we work back around this stitch here with a front post treble again, skipping the stitch behind the treble, 2 single crochet, and there is another DC back loop DC combination. So the DC, single crochet in the back loop only, and DC double crochet in the same loop as before, skipping the stitches behind the double crochets, 2 single crochet. Now we're back above the 2 together stitch, and we work a picot single crochet in the top of that 2 together stitch. Then another 2 single crochet, and then we're here in the next free front loop, and we do the same. Double crochet, single crochet in the back loop only, another double crochet, skipping the stitches behind those double crochets, another 9 single crochet, and again I'm working in the outer loop of the puff stitch here, and then the puff stitch here will be our last stitch of the side. Close with a chain 1, and I'm working in the corner already then. So here we are. Now for stitch marker placements. Again, you can place a stitch marker in those 3 front loops here. These are the first ones, the first and the last. On this side, and then the second and third. Second, there we go, and third. And just notice that I still have the stitch marker in here, which is absolutely unnecessary. So now if we've marked everything, first and last, second and third, and still those 2 top loops of that stitch here that we will work in very soon. Or actually in the next round. But first we have to finish this round, close the round with a slip stitch in the first single crochet, and then we'll be together for round 30. We are in round 30, which starts with a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet in the chain 2 corner space, and then again a puff stitch in the next corner, or rather a puff stitch over the next stitch and in the corner below that stitch. Again, to continue, I work in the outer loop of the puff stitch from the previous corner, and we make 4 single crochet. The next stitch is a front post treble around this DC here. Not sure whether you can see it properly. So we made a DC here earlier, and that's where we work around with a treble. So front post treble, followed by Also skip the stitch behind the front post treble, and then we make 2 single crochet in the back loop, and another 2 single crochet. Then we're here again, where we work a DC in this front loop here. Skip the stitch behind, double crochet, single crochet, and then another DC in the same front loop. And I'm keeping the stitch marker in this time because later on we will work in the stitch again. So this is followed by 5 single crochet, and the third of those will go into the picot single crochet. 3, 4 and 5. Then we work another DC single DC combination. So work a double crochet, a single crochet, and a double crochet in the same front loop. Always remember to skip the stitches behind the special stitches. So from here we make 4 single crochet, now I'm going to work into these stitches with a treble. That's a treble 0 minus 3, because from the starting to count from the next stitch we go neither ahead nor behind, but we go 3 rounds below. So we can take this one out, skip the stitch behind the treble, and then 1 single crochet, and then we make a single crochet in this third loop. That's 2. We can take this out now, and then the third single crochet goes into that single crochet just after that rose, after the rosebud, just here. Okay, and then we have another treble 0 minus 3 into these front loops here. Skip the stitch behind the treble and 4 single crochet. Then we just work symmetrically. We're in the DC single DC area again. So DC, skip the stitch behind the double crochet, single crochet, and DC in the same front loop. Two, 5 single crochet, 3, 4, 5, and then again in DC, single DC, DC, skip the stitch behind, single crochet, and DC in the same front loop. Then after that we continue with 2 single crochet, a single crochet in the back loop only, and another 2 single crochet. Now we go forward with a treble. That's a treble plus 1 minus 3, by the way. So from here, plus 1 minus 3. 1, 2, 3. Here is the double crochet we made in an earlier round. We work around that one. Skip the stitch behind that front post treble and 4 single crochet. And the puff stitch in the corner. Well, in the corner 1 round below, to be precise. and then we're here in the corner with our first corner single crochet. So that is round 30. Now for stitch marker placement. Oh, I've taken this one out, should have kept it in. So we just keep those stitch markers in, and I'm going to place more stitch markers in that first and last free front loop here. So just beside those. Could have kept this one in as well. And I'm going to place stitch markers in those top loops here again. We will be working behind those stitches, which means that we keep those loops free here to work into them later on. It's just for easy reference for us to find them later. So repeat on the other three sides, close with a slip stitch into the first single crochet after starting corner, and we'll be together for round 31. We start round 31 as the others. Single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 2 corner space. And then we continue with a puff stitch around the stitch, around the next stitch into the corner space. 1, 2, 3 yarn overs for me, maybe the same for you or more or less. And again, working in the closing chain on this side, continue with 3 single crochet, a single crochet in the back loop only, and another 3 single crochet. Then we're working a DC, single crochet in the back loop only, and another DC in the same free front loop. Skip the stitch behind those DCs, working 2 single, and then we work down into this front loop here that already contains those 2 double crochets. That's from the previous round. We skipped the stitch behind this treble here, and we've got 3 single crochet in the back loop, and another 3 single crochet again. And we work in this free front loop here again between those double crochets, making a treble, skip the stitch behind the treble, and continue with 1 single crochet. Now we're going to work a 2 together stitch. I've called it 2 together A. So the first part, the first leg of this stitch, is a treble, a front post treble that goes around this front post treble here from the previous round. That's the first leg. Keep it unfinished. The second leg is a double treble plus 4 minus 1. So we work into this stitch here. That's the top of the treble 0 minus 3 from the previous round. Work in those top loops. That's 4 stitches ahead from the next stitch, from this stitch. We skip this stitch here, and then working behind, making sure to work behind this 2 together A, we work 3 single crochet. 1, 2, and 3. Now we are behind this stitch again, where we work a DC BB in those 3 loops here. So when we skipped the stitch behind this treble, those loops have been left free, and this is where we work a double crochet into them. Okay, so now then we work 3 single crochet, and now we work behind this treble here. So we're now going backwards kind of. So we work in the reverse order. We also work these stitches here in the reverse order, which means we've got the DCBB. Now we work 3 single crochet. Now our first leg, we're going to work this 2 together stitch again, but the first leg is the double treble part that goes in the top loops of this treble that you may have marked with a stitch marker. Still keep it unfinished, and the second leg will go around this front post treble here. Okay, that's it. And then we skip the stitch behind this 2 together stitch. So your next single crochet should go into the top of the DC that you made in the previous round. Now we're working a treble into that free front loop here, between the DCs. Skipping the stitch behind it, we work 3 single crochet, single crochet in the back loop only, and another 3 single crochet. Then again we're going to work into this free front loop here. We already have 2 double crochet. Work between those double crochet a treble in the front loop. Then we skip the stitch behind the treble. We work 2 single crochet, and then again our famous combination, the double crochet and our single crochet in the back loop only, another double crochet in the same front loop as the previous one, skipping the stitch behind, working 3 single, a single crochet in the back loop only, and another 3 single. And I'm working on this side, I'm going to work in the first loops of the puff stitch, skipping the closing chain again. And then the puff stitch into that corner space that is just below the next stitch. And then we are in the corner. I'm going to take these out. I'm going to leave these in if you want to work with stitch markers. We're going to work into these stitches again later on. And then we also place a stitch marker in these first 3 front loops here, the first, oh sorry, the first will be, I'm using an orange because that's for a different kind of stitch, the first and the last 3 front loop. That's the color D. If you work with a different color, So that's the first and the last, and the red, in my case color A, goes in the third and the fourth free front loop, and these are just above this picot stitch here. And then we use color B, which goes into the second just between those DCs again, and the next to last stitch, front loop, also between those double crochets here. Oops, so like that. Okay, and then we place some more of those green ones, which we put in the top loops of those two together stitches that we made in this round, like that. So we've got lots of stitch markers in this round, four different colors, if you choose to use some. Okay, so repeat on the other three sides, and then close with a slip stitch into the first single crochet of the starting corner, and then we continue our work with round 32. We start round 32 with a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 2 corner space. Now we begin with the puff stitch again. So we work the puff stitch around the next stitch into the corner space just below the next stitch. Close with a chain 1, and I continue to work, and my first stitch goes into the outer loops, which on this side is the closing chain. I'm making 3 single crochet. Then we've got a DC back loop DC combination, so we work the DC in the front loop only of the next stitch, which you may have marked with a stitch marker. Then the single crochet in the next stitch, so we skip the stitch behind the DC, and then another DC in the same front loop in which we work the first DC again. Then 2 single crochet and a similar combination again, but we're working in this front loop here, and this time we work a single crochet, a double crochet, skip the stitch behind the double crochet, and then a single crochet, and then again a double crochet. And this time we keep this stitch marker in here, and this one we can take out and place in the next free front loop, next round. So we skip the stitch behind the double crochet, 5 single crochet, and the third should be in the top of this treble here. Then again, DC back loop DC combination, so working a double crochet in the front loop, and then a single crochet in the back loop only in the current round, and then a double crochet in the same front loop as before, and we skip the stitch behind each double crochet. Now 4 single crochet that should bring you just before this marked stitch here, which was the 2 together stitch from the previous round. And remember, we skipped the stitch behind the 2 together, and now we're working a double crochet in that skipped stitch behind and below that stitch. Now we've got 11 single crochet. And 11, and then you'll add another 2 together stitch, and we do the same. We'll work a double crochet in those loops of that skipped stitch from 2 rounds below, and we skip the stitch in front of the double crochet. Now we work again 4 single crochet, and here we are, we have the DC back loop DC combination. So DC in the front loop of the next stitch, or a stitch one ahead and 2 below, skip the stitch behind, single crochet in the back loop only, and then a DC in the same front loop. And with those here, we might as well do that while we're here. Stitch marker placement for the next round. I'm just moving this 1 round up, and also here. Oh, there we go. We skip the stitch behind the DC. We'll make 5 single crochet. And then we are here again, where we work a DC in this marked front loop here, and then a single crochet, and another DC in the same front loop, and we keep this stitch marker in here. Then 2 single crochet, and we do the same. We work a DC, and this time, for ease of reference, because it's easier to do it now than later, I'm just going to move this stitch marker 1 round up, because I'm working a single crochet in the back loop only of the next stitch. And then I'm going back into this DC here, where I worked the previous double crochet. We skip the stitches behind those double crochets always. 1, 2, 3 single crochet, and then the last stitch. So this is not a stitch, this is the closing chain of this puff stitch, and I worked on this side, I worked in the normal loops. In the outer loops again, these are the inner loops, outer loops of the puff stitch, and then we've got 1 more puff stitch here, so the round is, or the side is finished, and the next stitch already is in the corner. So that is round 32. We've already placed our stitch markers, so all you need to do is to continue on the other 3 sides and close with a slip stitch, and that's your round 32 finished then. And I'll meet you in round 33. So we are now in round 33, and we started with a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the starting corner, and then again the puff stitch into the corner that is below the next stitch. close the puff stitch with a chain 1, and now we're working 5 single crochet, and I'm again starting in the outer corner of the puff stitch from the previous round. 5, and now we're going to work the small rose, which is a pretty little flowery decorative stitch. Is pretty easy to work to. So we start with a double crochet in the free front loop here that is between those double crochets. Then we work a chain 1, another double crochet and a chain 1, and a third double crochet, and then we pull up a loop, take the hook out of the loop, place it in the first double crochet that we made, first of those 3. Then we pull the loop through and we close with a chain 1. This chain 1 is part of this stitch and does not count as an extra stitch. You can see that it's very similar to a popcorn stitch, but very light, much lighter, and possibly quicker to make too. So I continue in the top of the next double crochet, and then I'll make 2 single crochet. Now we work a front post treble around this front post treble here. Oh, it was a double treble, I think, that we made earlier. We skipped the stitch behind the front post treble, and then we work 1 single crochet, and then another treble in this free front loop here. We skip the stitch behind this treble, and then we work 6 single crochet. Now we work the DC back loop DC combination, a DC in the front loop, a single crochet in the back loop of the current round, and then another DC in the same front loop in which we just worked the other DC, the other double crochet. Skipping the stitches behind the double crochets, another 2 single crochet, and now we're going to work a front post treble around these 2 stitches. We've got that 2 together stitch that is maybe also on your project marked with a stitch marker, and I actually do recommend to place one, even though it's a little bit tricky to work around it. It will be easier to find those loops later on. So we're working a front post treble around that stitch here, skip the stitch behind it, and then we make 3 single crochet. Now we're going to work the butt stitch or rosebud. So I'm going to make 1 single crochet, and I'm going to place a temporary stitch marker in here in the 3rd loop of this first stitch, because it will help me to work into that, or to find it and work into that later on. And I'm making another 2 single crochet into that back loop only. Now I'm turning my work, and I make 4 single crochet in the front loop of the same stitch. And I'll continue to turn in the same direction, and then I work a slip stitch into that 3rd loop that closes this rosebud, and I continue in the next stitch, make another 3 single crochet, and then we'll work another rosebud. So I start with a single crochet in the back loop only of the next stitch, place my stitch marker in the 3rd loop, another 2 single crochet in that same back loop, finding the front loop, turning my work, 4 single crochet all together in that front loop. Continue to work, continue to turn the work, and then a slip stitch in that third loop, another 3 single crochet, and one more rosebud. Placing the stitch marker in the third loop of the first stitch, 2 more single crochet, 4 single crochet in the front loop only of the same stitch, continuing to turn the work, close the stitch or close the rosebud with a slip stitch in the third loop, and continue. So we'll make another 3 single crochet, and now we're going to work backwards around that. Do I have 3? 1, 2, 3, yeah. Around that 2 together stitch here. And you can see just by looking at this how these can easily disappear. So it's good to have a stitch marker there. Skip the stitch behind this front post treble, and then we have 2 single crochet and another DC single and back loop only, and DC in the same front loop combination. Let me take this out, it makes it easier. This one's very resistant. Let me try again. There we go. That's it. And skipping those stitches behind. Now 6 single crochet. A treble in this front loop here between those double crochets. Between those double crochet in the same front loop, and then 1 single crochet, and now again we work a front post treble around this stitch here, the front post double treble I think it was from a previous round. 2 more single crochet, then the rosebud again, then the small rose again, finding that. Oh, look what I've done. I've placed it in the third loop, did I? Or did I just pull it through? Interesting, isn't it? I'm grabbing this free front loop here. A DC, chain 1, another DC, chain 1, and a third DC. Release the hook, now pull through, chain 1 to close it. And I'm finishing this side with first 5 single crochet. And as the very last stitch, a puff stitch in the corner. And then a single crochet in the corner as part of the corner stitch. And that is round 33. A little bit laborious because of the rosebuds here, but you see they're quite quick and easy to make in the end. It's not that bad. So round 33. Now for stitch marker placements, if you want to use stitch markers, you can place a stitch marker here in this free front loop. As I said, I usually don't even bother because I have to fill them out from underneath anyway, as you just saw, and here too. But maybe it makes your next round a little bit quicker. So there you go. These are the 3 front loops. I keep the stitch markers in those third loops because in the next round we're going to work over them into these third loops again. And I also keep these ones in here because we will be working into those as well. So to finish the round, just repeat on the other sides, close with a slip stitch into the first single crochet of the starting corner, and that'll be around 33, and we'll be together in round 34. Part 2 is almost done, so we are in the next to last round, round 34, which we start as usual with a single crochet, chain 2, single crochet, and from here the puff stitch A to be precise, because it goes around another stitch into that corner below the next stitch. I'm starting to work 15 single crochet, and the first one, as you probably saw, like in the previous rounds, goes into the outer loop of the puff stitch from the previous round, and now we are working in this round in the closing chain of the small rows. So let me see, I think it's a 7th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a 7th stitch. 10 and another 5. So that's 15. The next stitch is a single crochet in the back loop only, and another 2 single crochet. That should bring you just before this double crochet, and we're going to work our DC single DC combination. This time is a DC double crochet in the front loop of that free front loop here, then a single crochet and another double crochet in the same front loop from the stitch 2 rounds below. I'm going to keep the stitch marker in because we're going to work into this stitch again later on. So skipping the double crochets, I'm going to work 4 single crochet, and then a treble, which will be worked into the stitch that is marked with a stitch marker. So just grabbing those loops. And you can see as soon as I let the stitch marker go, how quickly the stitch is just disappearing. Then we skip the stitch behind the treble and we work 3 single crochet. The second will be worked into the third loop that is still marked with a stitch marker, but now I can take it out. And the third is just the next after this rosebud. The next stitch is a double treble now, also into these marked loops. That's the top loops of this double treble here. We're working into that stitch. Now we can take the stitch marker out, skip the stitch behind the double treble, and again 3 single crochet. And also again the second goes into the third loop of that rosebud stitch. And the third of those stitches, the 3 single crochet, goes in the next after the rosebud. Then a repeat, again a double treble, into those marked loops here, and in the loops that are marked with that stitch marker. You can take them out, skip the stitch behind the double treble, 3 single, where the second is in the third loop of the rosebud, and the third just after it. You may have to pull it a little bit to the side to find the actual correct stitch. And then the last stitch is a treble into these loops here. Oops, that should be a treble into these loops here. Oh, I can take that one out as well. We'll skip the stitch behind the treble, and from the next we've got 4 single crochet. And then we're working the DC single DC combination in this free front loop here, DC single DC. Oh, I'm keeping it in because we work in that stitch again. Then 2 single crochet, a single crochet in the back loop only, and then 15 single crochet. That's 5. And the 9th, 8, 9 should fall in the top, in these closing chains of the small rows. We're going to work another 6, and that brings us to the puff stitch, and we have a puff stitch around the last stitch into that corner again, and the first of the single crochet chain to single crochet combination of the corner. So that is round 34. There we go. And stitch marker placement, we're going to put a stitch marker in this free front loop, and so the first and the last. It's only those 2, so easy to find. Okay, so to finish the round, repeat on the other 3 sides and close with a slip stitch in the first single crochet of the starting corner, and we continue with our last round, round 35. I'm not sure whether I've shown you, I don't think so because it's not on here. So we've taken out those stitch markers when we worked these stitches here, these double trebles and those trebles. We're going to place new stitch markers just in the tops of those stitches. We will be working into them again, even later on as well. So we just mark them so that we can find them a little bit easier. And I think that should be it for now. Okay, so let's start with round 35. Single crochet, chain 1, and then the single crochet, chain 2, single crochet into the chain 2 corner space. Again, we start with the puff stitch into the corner space, then 1 single crochet. I'm working it in the outer loop of the puff stitch, single crochet in the back loop only, 3 single crochet, and that's a repeat, back loop only again, and another 3 single crochet. And then there's another single crochet in the back loop only, that's a third, and then 5 single crochet. Now we're working a DC, back loop DC combination, DC, back loop, DC, and then another 2 single crochet. And now we're working into this free front loop here, a treble. Remember to skip the stitch behind the treble and then 1 single crochet. Now we're going to make the 2 together A stitch, which looks complicated but is actually quite simple. So the first leg that we're working will be a treble, and we work it around this treble here. So that's on the outside. That's the first leg. Keep the treble unfinished, then yarn over 3 times for double treble. And this goes into the top loops of this treble. We keep this stitch marked because we will work into this again. So I'm just working the double treble leg into this stitch here, and now yarn over all 3. Now it's very important not to continue like this, but to work behind this 2 together A stitch, skip the stitch behind that 2 together A, and then work 3 single crochets. Now we're going to make another special stitch, which is a 2 together C. The first leg of this 2 together C is a DCBB, that is a double crochet that goes behind and below that stitch here, and we work that in the skipped loops, or in the loops of the skipped stitch. Don't finish the double crochet. The second leg is a double treble that we work into the stitch 4 ahead and 1 round below. That is the next stitch that we have marked here. It's the double treble that we worked in the previous round, the first double treble we worked in the previous round. So the second leg goes into those top loops. So that stitch is 4 stitches ahead and 1 round below. So we made it in the previous round. And again, we skip this stitch here now, and we work behind this stitch, of course, 3 single crochet. And keep the stitch markers in if you want to. Now we're going to work another another DCBB, this time just the DCBB, the complete DCBB behind this double treble here. 3 single crochet, and then another DCBB behind the next stitch here, behind the next double treble from the previous round. Just 1 DCBB, double crochet behind and below. Skip the stitch in front here, 3 single crochet. Now we're going to make the reverse of this stitch here. So first our leg goes into this stitch here, behind which we just made the DCBB. So 3 times yarn over for the double treble, then working in the top loops of the double treble here. keep the stitch unfinished, and now we work a DCBB behind this treble from the previous round. That's it. Okay, now again we go ahead, we skip the stitch in front of the DCBB, 3 single crochet. Now we're working backwards again, and we start with the double treble leg, 3 times yarn over. We go back into that stitch, the treble, the top loops of the treble, behind which we just worked the DCBB leg. Make an unfinished double treble, and then we're working the treble around this stitch here. So this is the mirror of the first stitch that we made. The first stitch we made was the 2 together A, was it? Yeah, I think 2 together A, and then we had the 2 together C. Then we worked a 2 together D, and then now we're working a 2 together B. I'm just using those because the rest of the stitch is endlessly long. So the short description is 2 together A, B, C, and D. So you've got all 4 stitches in this round here. Skip the stitch behind this 2 together, and we work 1 single crochet in the next, and then a treble between those double crochets from the previous round, 2 rounds below. Skip the stitch behind the treble, oops, 2 single crochet, and now we're working in this stitch again here, DC back loop DC combination, so DC in the front loop, then single crochet in the back loop only of the current round for next stitch, and then the DC in the same front loop in which we worked the previous DC. Skip the stitch behind the last DC again, and 5 single crochet. Single crochet in the back loop only, and then 3 single crochet, back loop only, another 3 single crochet, back loop only again, and we finish with 1 single crochet, and then the puff stitch in that corner space. Oops. There we go. And the last stitch on this side is the single crochet into the chain 2 corner space. Okay, that is our last round 35 in part 2. We'll continue Claire in part 3, of course, and there's one more part then to go. For now we place some stitch markers. So we've got these, of course. I'm going to add a stitch marker into the top loops of the first and the last of those special stitches here in the middle that we made. We'll be working into those again. I will also place stitch markers in those 3 front loops here. 1, 2, and 3 on this side, and the same on the other side. So the first 3 and the last 3 front loops on each side, and of course I'm going to place a stitch marker between those DCs in that free front loop. And I made a single crochet and back loop only between those DCs, and I'm placing a stitch marker in the front loop of, in the free front loops of those stitches. Okay, and that's it. So to complete part 2, you just have to finish around the other 3 sides and then close with a slip stitch. Maybe, I'm not sure how your work looks. This is the first time that I'm working with this wool, the first time that I'm working with this yarn. It's a bit wobbly, a bit too wobbly for my taste, so as you can see here maybe. So I will be blocking this part before I continue. You can do the same, or you can just continue with parts 3 and 4 and then block in the end. This is just for me so I can show you a nicer square and maybe make a picture too, a nice picture. So that's totally up to you whether you want to block in between or only at the end or at all. Maybe you don't want to block at all. So I'll leave that to you, and I look forward to seeing you in part 3 of the Claire Square.